Hello and welcome to another podcast with me, Troy Francis, and this morning we are sitting, and I say we because I have a very special guest on the show today. We are sitting on a wonderful terrace in Warsaw looking out over a sunlit street. This is a very nice, quiet little street. We've just had a very lovely breakfast and now we are sitting back over coffee and mineral water, and we're going to chew the fat on day game, and specifically doing game and doing day game when you're an older gentleman, because my good listeners, I'm afraid 45 years young, so it's getting to that point now where I'm no longer the young buck that I was. And my guest today, who is Mr. Alex Forrest of 52 First Dates fame and Too Late Mate, his memoir of that title, joins me to discuss this. And you are also a gentleman of a more fine vintage, I believe.
Yeah, that's my favourite metaphor. I'm a vintage. I'm a Chateau Lafite. Well, I won't tell you what year, but I've crested the 50, put it that way. And I think we're perhaps going to be discussing whether that handicaps your ability to date girls, isn't it? And that's a very interesting topic. Somebody was chatting about it. And what, as you say, what better conditions? It's a beautiful sunny morning in Warsaw.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, I think, the salient issue, because, I mean, as I say, I'm in my mid-40s now, and when I first got into game properly, I was 30, really, or I was in my late 20s, and then I got into sort of game in the sense that I read about it. I read The Game by Neil Strauss, and then I got onto message boards in London and everything when I was 30 years old. And even at that point, there was this feeling that, oh my God, am I too old for this? You know, and of course, that looking back, that was completely insane. But if anything, things were going to get better as I got older. But you know, I think as you're going into your 30s, you think, God, you know, my 20s are nearly over. You know, I'm into this is, you know, and of course, then you go through your 30s and you realise that's not the case at all. But I think guys listening to this who are maybe in their late 30s or early 40s or even going into their 50s might start to think, well, hang on a minute, is there a cut-off point? Is there a point at which it becomes difficult or indeed impossible for me to walk up to a girl that I've never met and start a conversation with her and take her on a date or whatever?
Yeah, I think it's not the logistics and the age, the number, and the physical, purely physical side isn't so much the issue. I mean, I got into daytime approach because I was interested, and I remain interested in finding a lifetime partner. I would like to get married, actually, would like to have a family. But I realised quite late on in my life, a lot later than 30, at age 46, that I was going the wrong way about it, and that I needed to get some dating and daytime approach skills down and get a little bit of mastery and start to enjoy the dating process and so on, and go through a little bit of a rite of passage. Now, so in a way, it is a value shift that makes it sort of less likely that I'm going to spend my remaining years chasing and wanting to have sex with younger girls. But in terms of, so that's just my choice, my decision.
Yeah. And
it's not something that doesn't interest me as much any longer, never majorly interested me. I always thought I was sort of going through a bit of a rite of passage. But I have had various experiences that I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that have really led to my sort of jaw dropping onto the floor, my eyes boggling out of my eye sockets like fucking cartoon bugs.
Yeah.
But my God, I would say it has got easier as I've got older to generate sexual attraction, to physically escalate with younger girls. Bizarrely.
Well, that's really interesting, and that's heartening for all of us probably listening to this. Or, I mean, whether we want to go on to have a long-term relationship or whether we want to, you know, to continue to play the field. It's interesting that you say it gets easier. Now, you are now living in Warsaw. You're from London originally, I believe, or you're living in London before. Now you're in Warsaw. I suppose some guys will say, well, is it easier in Eastern Europe? Is it easier in a country where perhaps there's less of a social expectation for age differences? Does that play into it at all? Or do you think it just comes down to individual girls and their particular preferences?
Yeah, there's a couple of little anecdotes that would probably be the best way of answering that question. After I'd been through my initial kind of 18-month bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, running about the streets of London like a crazy person when I first started this stuff nearly 5 years ago, I remember about 18 months in, I spent a spell in Warsaw, but I then came back to London and going out with a buddy to I think it's called the Porterhouse in Covent Garden.
Yeah.
And hooking up with a young German girl, not English, but German. She was 23. I was at that point like 48 or 47, 48. And it was extraordinary how it worked. She was, not all girls are like this, obviously, but she was a little bit more bohemian, artistic, enjoying life, a bit of an adventuress. I found her very attractive. And that very night, we ended up in a bar. I ended up with this buddy who had a long-term girlfriend, so he let me get on with it. I remember making out with her outside the Baltic Bar, Blackfriars. And I remember taking her up to my apartment as well. We didn't have sex, but that's another story for other reasons. But it was interesting to me that she had absolutely no issues with being physical and making out in the dark with a 40. What did I say?
48.
That's what happened to you.
48? Did you say 48?
Yeah, 47, 48. Yeah. And then the other anecdote that comes to mind is a girl that I met probably a year after that, who I remember I was doing a podcast with John Matrix, and I remember that she was a tall, slim redhead, probably 24, I think 24, 25, and I met her in the city, and she was going on a date when I took her number, but the date was a failure, and we met, and we had a most fizzy, fun date, first date in a bar. John Matrix saw her because she turned up early whilst we were still doing the podcast, and he said to me if I can just, because one question you might have is, well, these girls are very attractive, and John Matrix, who
yes, he was a great seducer and good looking guy as well.
Yeah, he said, my God, Alex, if you're getting that sort of quality, you're obviously doing something right. And during that evening, again, we didn't have sex. It was the first date, blah blah blah, for whatever reason. But I remember just because the vibe was there. Because she noticed the tripod I had, which I was using to do the podcast with John. I had my kit with me. And we did a video together. And she was super hot, and we shortly after that video we made out because the vibe was there. She tested my frame. I passed the frame test. And she was on. And she wanted more could have happened, but as I say, I've got this kind of dark value system that people knock me for. I don't know where I'm coming from, but
where you don't always take it to the conclusion, if you like, if you don't feel that the vibe's right, or you don't feel it's the right time to do that for whatever reason you think.
That was actually, in that instance, that I wasn't doing that. That was just a plain missed opportunity. That was a one. Sometimes they'll give you a window. They only give it to you once. That would have been a fun night. But I was doing this thing where I was keeping the first date short. I was practicing. I've been listening to a Black Dragon thing, and I was just keeping the first dates very short. So I made a specific decision to keep the first date short. But really, it was only on that night. No, it's true, isn't it? There are these windows of opportunity, and then if we miss them, then it goes forever, unfortunately. Which is just But I think with experience we start to learn to recognise that, and then we can choose whether to take it forward or not.
Sorry.
Sorry, Troy, can I just say one thing? And she was an English rose. She was a Keira Knightley, slim English girl. So don't get any ideas that it's just about the nationality of the girl in question.
Yeah, that's interesting, because there is this whole thing, isn't there, about day games specifically, where guys are like, oh, it doesn't work on English girls, it only works on Eastern European, sluts or whatever. And of course, that's not the case at all. I've just put up an infield today, actually, with an English girl that an English student that I got chatting to in Oxford Street. And I mean, as you say, if the vibe is right and your man to woman polarity is correct, then you can make these things happen. Guys ask me this, so I'll ask you, and apologies for this in advance. Hair colour, does that make any difference? Because you're now a silver fox. I'm still sort of trying to hang on to my wonderful brunette locks, but I'm not sure for how much longer. Does that make a difference at all? Because guys, several guys have asked me in the last couple of weeks, I'm in my late 40s, I'm starting to go grey. Is this a problem or not?
Yeah, I wish it did make a difference. I also wish weight made a difference. Because if it did, I'd probably sort my shit out better.
Well, fair enough. Well, there you go. That is a novel take on it. So if only weight and if only hair colour made a difference in terms of getting girls, but apparently it doesn't.
No, I mean it's just so bizarre. I mean, I've got a pot belly, and I'm grey-ish. I'm not proper grey, but I'm silver.
Apologies for tainting you with the grey word, but let's say ash blonde. Let's say
ash blonde. That's a very nice term. And guys have to deal with that. It's usually an ego thing about I'm grey. Oh dear, what does that mean? And I'm going. It's the inner voices in your head that lead to the failure, not the biology, not the primal primal attraction that's going on. Once the polarities, it doesn't matter if you're overweight without any hair or with grey hair.
Yeah.
And I'll just give one more anecdote.
Please.
Which is, as part of the 52 First Dates project, I went on a date with a young girl who was at university and in another city here in Poland. I'll show you a photograph if you're interested later, but she was blonde, petite, also quite girlish, quite shy, not the sort of girl that you would have expected to be at all interested in sex with an older dude. Nothing happened at that time, but then a year later we hooked up, and she asked me whether she could stay around my place because she had meeting some friends on Sunday and she wanted to stay at my place on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And I remember being in my bedroom with her. We'd made out at a bar. I'd bounced her back home to my place, and I remember taking her dress off, and she had this lovely crimson underwear, but she was so girly. And this was the case where I just decided I didn't want to go through with it, actually. I was a bit of an old chode about it, and she slept on my sofa. I don't know whether it was the right thing to do or not, but she was just ready to give herself to me in that moment. And
yes,
she was, it wasn't so much the age, but she was a young 23. She was 22, whatever she was. But I can't believe it, because I look at myself in the mirror sometimes, and I've got quite a belly now, all grey. I've got my hair, good hair. And it just seems to me that it has, it's not nothing, but it has. I tell you what, I've got far bigger challenges in daytime approach and dating than being slightly overweight and having silver hair. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Getting current, what's your day game situation like at the moment? Are you out in the field doing it a lot, or are you taking a bit of a break, or where are you at sort of in the very recent past, if you like? Well, in the autumn of last year, I felt like I've been running around the streets like a crazy jackrabbit for too long.
Yeah.
And really that the development was naturalising it, making it part of my life. And also, as you get older, younger guys just won't understand this, but older guys will. As you get older, there's just less time in the day.
Yes. Yeah, because you're a very busy man anyway, aren't you? You have your business, and you're doing this as a sideline, really.
Yeah, and going out 2 hours 3 times a week, or however long it is, and also going out on a couple of dates a week, which I was at a certain point last year, is both consuming of time and consuming of your energy.
Yeah.
And so it was then that I hit upon this idea of the sort of the natural approach.
Yes.
And in the autumn of last year, I was committed to only approaching as and when, but definitely approaching as and when I saw an attractive girl, just as I was going about my normal day to day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, over the Christmas period at the beginning of this year, I've been a bit... I've caught the winter blues and I haven't been out much, but I've started to, now the sun's come out, and I've started to approach girls. So yesterday, for example, I went to the shopping centre here to buy a shirt, and I bumped into a couple of girls and got a telephone number. I did the same thing the previous week when I was going to buy a spatula for my frying pan.
Very nice.
So what I now find is I really now love this new evolution, if you like, of and it's a fresh challenge, because to actually approach a girl, like you see someone over there and you actually go over approach her whilst you're on your laptop doing a bit of work, it's actually quite hard. Yeah,
rather than getting into that sort of flow state that you get if you say, right, I'm going to do a 2-hour day game session or something, which is kind of more what I've been doing recently. I've more been doing... I did what Tom was doing actually at the beginning of the year. So I don't know if you heard, but he was doing 10 in 10, so 10 approaches per day for 10 days in a month. So you do 100 approaches within 10 days, and then you stop and you have 2 weeks off or whatever it is. Well, over 2 weeks off, and then you get back into it. So I was doing that, and now I've had to sort of spread it out a little bit more. But I do tend to be doing these more immersive sessions that go on for a few hours, and then you get that real momentum and you get kind of into state.
Yeah, no, that's quite right. Actually, it's not a one size fits all. You've got to follow a certain set of rules. I can envisage myself going out of an afternoon just to sort of shake off the cobwebs and get into the bit of a flow, like you say. But on the whole, I'm finding, particularly after the autumn, where I met a very attractive girl on the train platform. We had a date in the buffet car, and then we had a mini relationship, slept together, and she was like a really nice, very attractive girl. And that had come about just because I was waiting for a train.
Yeah.
And she was on the platform.
Yeah. That's really cool. I love those organic sort of approaches more. In fact, I think in a way they work better, because as much as we try to make the classic day game approach seem natural, sometimes there can be something a bit inauthentic about it. I don't know if you've ever felt that. Yeah,
I think that hits the nail on the head, I think. What I discovered from this sort of natural approach thing was I would either get just sort of properly swatted aside like an annoying fly, because they were too busy, they were married or whatever, and it was thank you but no thank you. Poles are quite polite actually. Nevertheless, it was a brush off, and it always stings. Or it would be incredibly powerful because of the spontaneity. I never had the problem where I felt like I was robotic.
Right.
And the girl she can pick up on that.
Yes. Yeah, I mentioned that because I've been going out doing a bit of coaching with some guys recently, and I was out with a couple of guys. This leads into the next question actually, but I was out with a guy last week, and he was very good, and he obviously knew a lot of, say, Tom Torrero's material. So he was saying a lot of the right things in the right order. And that made him quite hard to coach in a way, because it was hard to say, well, you should have said this or you should have said that, because actually the things he was saying were sort of canned lines and canned stories, and they were all more or less right. If you picked up a book about day game, you'd read these things and you'd say, I see what he's doing here. But there was just something lacking in it, and as much as I could define it, it was he wasn't bringing himself into it enough. He was saying the stuff, but it was just, and the girl was just kind of standing there going, why are you saying all this stuff? Do you know what I mean? Because he wasn't sort of bringing himself into the interaction. And maybe when the interactions are a bit more organic, like if there was a girl just sitting here and we, started a conversation with her, it would be a bit more natural, and it would... Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense, because I think the daytime approach tools are to be thrown away once they've fixed the problem. And actually, if you wouldn't carry a toolbox around, a big old clanky old big toolbox around in your car on the dashboard once the car's fixed, because then it starts to actually get in the way. It's the beautiful paradox about this stuff.
Yes, exactly. Well, I just carry my big clanky tool around and try and get it in the box whenever I can. But that actually leads me on to the next thing. So just getting, in terms of technique, or however you want to characterize it, what are you doing these days? Are you direct? I mean, obviously you studied the London day game model. I don't fully follow the London day game model myself, although you can see I've nicked bits of it, but I'm not a full-on London day game model advocate necessarily, although it does work. But are you following any? Firstly, do you go in direct or indirect? And secondly, what are you then doing? Are you following a template, or is it kind of freestyling at this stage?
Yeah, it does depend upon the situation. One girl, 8 a.m, laptop, coffee shop. She was smoking a cigarette. She was working too. Telling her, "Hi, can I just say something very quickly? I think you look really attractive. I want to open up a conversation with you." Would have been a bit too clunky. And so I actually did what you might consider to be chody. She I asked her for a cigarette, and then it was her last one, and then after a little bit of a chit chat, and 20 minutes later, I actually went round the corner to a corner shop and bought her the cigarettes.
Yeah.
That turned out to be a strong mini relationship. Right.
Yeah.
So it was with a slightly older girl. She would have been late 30s, I think, but she was an attractive girl. So now, generally, I still do follow the model, I would say, when I'm approaching girls in the street, but it's not necessarily in some sort of a systematic order. So I will be thinking, hang on, have I actually shown this girl my intent? If I've opened direct, and if not, you can do it at the end of the interaction. Or say, look, I just wanted to say, I know you've got to go and I'm busy too, but I just want to be honest, I find you very attractive.
Yes.
And I'd like to get to know you better.
Yes.
Let's swap numbers and meet up for a drink. That's fine.
Yeah.
But then you've covered it. Again, grounding, I think it's important, like particularly in a foreign city, to say, look, and I threw that in yesterday. It was like at the end of the conversation, it's like, I've covered that, yeah, oh, shit, grounding. And I just said, well, look, you've got to go, you've got to train to catch. I'm actually a lawyer working based, I've been here for 2 years, and anyway, so next time you're in the city, we should get in touch with each other, and she gave me a number.
Yeah.
But I made sure to ground it.
Yes.
So that she didn't go back home and think there was this crazy guy who approached me in the street.
Yeah.
He's probably some sex tourist from overseas.
Yeah.
So I still follow the model, I think, but I completely jumble up. And I guess if you didn't generate attraction, say, or spike or challenge on the interaction, you could still do it on the date. You could still do it a little bit on the text exchange afterwards as well.
Yeah.
But you do need to hit the various points of the interaction.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I totally agree. And I mean, sometimes when I look over infields that I've done, and actually filming yourself is really an illuminating voyage of self-discovery, because I've been doing this stuff for years, for many years, and I'd never filmed myself until this year. And I see myself mixing it all up, really. But I think the fundamentals always have to be there. You have to approach, you have to go up and start talking to her in the first place, because otherwise nothing's going to happen. You have to spark attraction somehow, and you also have to make it clear in some way that you are interested in her in a wanting to date her type way, because otherwise you do get this kind of horrible thing where she's a bit like, well, who's this does he just want to chat? Is he just being friendly, or and then you've got to throw a little bit of comfort in there as well. I think comfort is sort of perhaps slightly neglected sometimes. I think you've got to show that fundamentally, underneath the cheeky bad boy exterior, if that's what you're going for, that you are, you're a decent guy, and she's going to be cool to go for a coffee with you.
Yeah, and I think that can really clinch it, particularly for the older dudes. It's quite important if they're looking for something long term that they have grounded it, because some girls will be young and just want a bit of fun, and they'll go with the sexual chemistry, but perhaps some older girls will want to know that you're a grounded guy too. So it could, it's once you, it's perverse, isn't it? When you start, you've got to generate attraction and crash and burn, and probably forget about trying to establish comfort in an interaction with the girl. But then once you've got the skills and you are generating attraction quite easily, then you probably need to go back the other way.
Yeah.
I like what John Matrix said, which is don't be afraid to tell stories about yourself.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Does he mean in the sense of so that she gets an understanding of who you are as a person rather than just a two-dimensional player? Exactly
right. At school, I had this experience with this French girl. It's actually funny, that's why I first liked you. I got this silly thing about French girls. And then when I was painting, because I went to art school.
Right, yeah.
I went over to Paris. I was seeing a girl at the time, or whatever.
Yeah.
But now I'm a boring lawyer, and I live and work in Warsaw.
Yes.
But so you can start to tell. Often childhood, I think, because that's where it's fun and it's not too about jobs and politics, and little childhood adventures and experiences can then easily lead on to grounding and being social. That's
interesting, and you're also creating that deeper rapport at the same time, I suppose, aren't you? Because you're sharing something about yourself.
Well, this is where it's lovely fine-tuning the skills in this area. You find a girl and she's a bit arty, and you just say, I'm going to just go with this story.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I always quite like it when I get those kind of girls, because that probably reflects my personality more. So it's always quite nice when you can go down that route. So, as we said, we're in Warsaw. So in a way, you're living the dream of many guys, because you've moved to Eastern Europe, and you're surrounded by all these Polish lovelies. So there's a couple of things about that. Firstly, just out of interest, why was that? Was that I think that wasn't entirely game related, but could you talk through how you ended up coming here? But secondly, as well, where are your favourite places to game? Because I know you've done different places. You've been in parts of Russia and things like that. So where are your where have you had a really good time in terms of doing this stuff?
Why I moved here was just one of these random things. It was a few years ago, and I was actually a bit down and out financially with the business.
Right.
I was running a lot of no-win, no-fee litigation in my law firm, which is actually very risky. It's often when you're at a low point, you decide to shake up your life and make the right and make the fearless decisions you kind of always realise you needed to have made.
Yeah.
You're so wrapped up in a cotton wool of comfort or regular job that you don't make them. So in a way, the universe sent me over here, and I found that I could run my business quite successfully remotely.
Right. Yes.
And obviously, I probably heard by then the rumours from people like Troy and Tom that Eastern Europe was quite rich in terms of girls, and also in terms of the types of girls.
Yes.
So the girls who perhaps weren't too, there were women rather than men, rather than women men.
Yes.
The term of women men.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up here, and the low cost of living, the high quality of life, the low cost of living was very attractive to me, and I've just sort of fallen in love with the city. That answers.
Absolutely. And then other places that you've been to do game, or where you've had many relationships. Are there any favourites that you have?
I've always liked London. It's such a rich variety. There's such a rich variety of nationalities and people there. Obviously Warsaw. I've enjoyed Krakow, and I've been to Russia, to Belarus, and I've had some. What I did there is, because I'm not a terror race seducer, I'm just an average Joe who's learnt a few skills, I realised I couldn't be a globe-trotting
Playboy. Playboy.
That's the word. Much as I love to have been, and much as a lot of guys this would like to be.
Yes.
So I set up, like over a period of 3 to 4 months, 6 months actually. So I'm going to go over there, and I picked a city, and I'm going to go over there 4 or 5 times, and then keep going back. And then actually one girl, then came over and visited me in Warsaw, so it kind of worked out. But can I answer the question in a different way? My favourite places in terms of a city are often the times of day.
Right. Yes.
And to fit in with my mood and my schedule. So, for example, if I've had a day flat out being a geeky lawyer and being in my head, as it were, going out in the afternoon on a spring, Tuesday afternoon and shaking off the cobwebs, that's a good time. In the morning, if I'm in a coffee shop working, at rush hour, for example, you can go into the tunnels here in the rush hour, and it's not so much the shopping centres at a certain time, perhaps on a busy Saturday afternoon. So it's more about being smart,
right?
About finding the spots and the times in which it's best.
Yes. No, that's really interesting. I find myself in London, I like probably later afternoon. I think there is a lull, even in a city as populous as London. I think in the middle of the afternoon there's a bit of a lull during the week, but when you get to about 5 or 6 o'clock, people are leaving work, and then even into 7, particularly on a summer evening, you can get this real magic kind of golden time where people are in a good mood, and it's sort of, and it can really gel at that point. So I suppose we're coming up to starting to wrap up now. First thing I would say then, so for any older guys, older, I don't even know how we define older really, but let's say late 30s, early 40s and upwards, so getting into 50s and potentially even older than that. What would you say to those guys if they're thinking, oh my God, I've reached the end, this is, I'm going to have to try Match.com, and it's going to be one match every 2 months, and it's, and all the rest of it. There's hope, yeah?
Yeah, I'd say buy my book. Too late, mate.
Yes.
Because there is a chapter in it in which I really do go down into a dark place.
Yeah.
And it was after I was gaming with some buddies, and I approached a girl. It was on Piccadilly, actually. I ran up and did the classic yad stop. Before I'd even opened my mouth, she said, "Oh my God, get away, you're old enough to be my grandfather."
Right.
And that was my baptism. I remember going out for weeks after with my mates, and I said, "No, I'm not." I was like, "I'm not approaching."
Yeah,
I'm not approaching. I'll pay a compliment, but I'm not doing it. I'm not getting burnt like that again.
I was going to say, because something like that. Well, I'm sure you're going to talk us through now, but something like that is quite cutting. I mean, I've had a girl say to me, "You're too old already." And did it not make you think, well, shit, right, I'm just going to drop, that's it, I'm never going to speak to another woman again, sort of thing? Or...
Yeah, that's what happened, and that's part of the process. You've got to suck it up and find a way through it. And I was rudderless for weeks, but I knew I had to stick with it, having decided to do it. And that's why I went out with these buddies, and they thought it was quite amusing. What's wrong, Alex? You can approach, I'm just going to watch.
Yeah.
It was like that.
Yeah. But then you discover that actually what one individual girl thinks is not representative of what girls in general think. And you're going to get different responses with different people.
Yeah, I mean, in goodness knows how many approaches, in the thousands. I think that's the only time that's happened. It must have happened more, I've just forgotten. But it can't be more than 5.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after that, later that same summer, that I remember walking along the South Bank, and it was that magic hour that you've spoken about. Yeah. And there was this Russian girl. God, she can't have been more than 19 or 20. I'm ashamed to say, because I am still a bit of a chode about at the age thing. And I remember going on a most amazing instant date with her.
Right, yeah.
And that just laid the demons to rest.
Yeah. I mean, generally speaking, when you're approaching a girl of that age or in her early 20s or whatever, does it, putting aside the outliers where they're oh my God, you know, like the girl you described, are they bringing up age at all, or does it just not really come into the equation?
But you don't really know, because you don't know why a girl is saying no.
True.
You know, they could gauge in polite conversation and then move off because they're just saying, hang on, this guy's too old. I number one, I don't look for young girls. I you know, really, it's got to be 25 or up for me these days.
Yes.
Well up. And number two, I think I remember reading about this in Mark Manson's book Models. There will be a big proportion of women who are simply not into dating older guys. I mean, but I think it's quite high, the proportion who are, particularly if you've got day game skills. Yeah, and it could be as as high as 50% or higher, with, let's say, a 50-year-old guy approaching a 23, 24-year-old girl if you get it right. The further east you go, the easier it is. So if you've got any issues in this area, go east, my friend.
Yes, absolutely. I'll be 60 living in Siberia in a hut. So obviously, you've got the YouTube channel. So I've been a big fan of the YouTube channel for a while now. It's always a pleasure to hear your tones discussing your latest adventures. And you've got the book Too Late Mate, and then you've got the series of books 52 First Dates. We discussed a little bit off air other projects that you're working on, but in terms of the sort of the game stuff and the sort of Alex Forrest game persona stuff, any plans for that? Do you know where you're... Because I remember on your YouTube channel a while ago, you were sort of almost asking people to say, do you think I should do tutorials, or where do you think I should go with this? I mean, have you got any sense of where you're going with it at the moment, or plans for the near future?
I'm in a little bit of an in-between state, to be honest with you. I'm now really, interested in dating girls with whom I think there's a long-term future, whose company I really enjoy, and I'm really not so much into, if I ever really was, just adventure sex. I wasn't really ever into it in a major way, to be honest with you, because as you get older you actually realise it's quite unsatisfying. You want partnership, and even if it's sexual, even if it's a mini relationship, you want some sort of partnership, not just one-off sex. Quite bloody exhausting as well. I mean, as you get older, you're more intelligent about husbanding the resources that you have.
Indeed.
So I'm afraid the answer to the question really is watch this space.
Okay.
I'm just rewriting Too Late Mate, cutting it down in size to send it to agents and publishers to try and find a wider audience for it.
Okay.
And I'm finishing up with this series of 12-part books, 52 First Dates. And as for the channel, I feel that some fresh adventure is required, but I'm taking a little bit of a break from it, because I don't just want to go pumping out material for the sake of it when I've not really got much to say.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's an interesting space that we're in, where the content, if you like, is so sort of founded in one's own personal life. It's a slightly odd sort of thing. But I hope that you do continue to put out more content on the channel, because I think, as we were saying before, I think there is a big audience for people who are interested in this kind of stuff, but for guys who are not in their 20s anymore, because YouTube's awash with stuff for guys in their 20s who are running around Europe and having a fun time and everything. But there are plenty of us who are not in that demographic anymore, but we still want this kind of material.
Yeah, I also feel it can become a little bit a case of navel gazing. I mean, if guys came to me and were interested in learning stuff or so on and so forth, and then I could see myself building a sort of a channel around that, But one of the problems is at my age, putting out in-field videos, it's not really the sort of where I come from or anything like that. But I'm passionate about day game. I mean, it's the king of dating. It's the king of approach. It's a magical skill.
Yes, absolutely. I noticed with interest actually recently you've been saying daytime approach as opposed to day game. Is that intentional? Do you feel like the term day game's become a bit loaded these days?
Problem is the word game is a loaded word, unfortunately, and I think a guy may be a younger guy, maybe, he wants adventure and he has to learn these skills. The guy wants to get married, he has to learn these and only sleep with one girl the rest of his life. He probably would be wise to learn these skills. So unfortunately game is loaded and been appropriated, if you like, probably misappropriated by the press as much as the pickup artist community, to mean fucking girls and not caring about
or manipulation
and manipulating them.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and I like daytime approach as a term, and I would also agree. I think it is the greatest way. Did you ever try, just out of interest before we finish, did you ever try dating sites? Have you ever tried? Are you on Tinder? Do you do that kind of stuff? And if so, and why did you default to day game as being the main way to meet people?
Yeah, read my books. I do, but some of the dates that I went on I specifically went on some Tinder dates.
Yeah.
And there are 3 that I write about where I enjoyed the evening, the girls were nice, one I fooled around with, but it wasn't the age or the quality that I got on the street, and I realised I just wasn't the best vehicle for me delivering my sort of value as a guy. Yeah. So it's more like that. It just wasn't the vehicle for me. Yeah.
No, fair enough. I would absolutely agree. I think, without a doubt, I think that real life approach, daytime approach, is the best way for any guy really to deliver their value, let alone guys, who are a bit older.
Yeah, and especially older guys, because you haven't got the good-looking guy game that chaps on Tinder capitalise on. You can be successful on Tinder, but often it's with a look, and the girls are selecting.
Yes.
With day game, and you get what you're kind of given by the Tinder machine. But for daytime approach, it's a whole other ball game.
Yes. It absolutely is a whole other ball game, and Warsaw is a box of chocolates that we can feast on for many moons. So with that, I'll bring the podcast to an end, but it's been lovely to meet you, lovely to chat to you, Alex.
And thank you for letting me shamelessly flog my book.
No, absolutely. Where can people find you if they want to find out more?
Streetstories.co.uk.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, Alex, well, thank you ever so much, and we will speak again very soon.
Thanks, Troy. It's been great.
Bye-bye.